I want to talk today about the difference between believing something, like learning it and, intuiting that it's true, um, understanding it deeply, that's kind of the next level, living as if it's true, and energetically feeling the truth such that living it is effortless and unconditional. And the reason I want to talk about this is because a lot of spiritual people can go around saying the right things, talking the talk, um, fluently, and even in some cases living as if they totally believe the truth of it. Um, but there's a brittleness to it often because it's like because they haven't had that energetic unbinding such that the it's really sank all the way to the point that that is truly unconditional. I see a lot of people walking around talking about love and light, and I'm like, you're one misfortune away from tossing that, aside because it's it's conditional. As long as things are going your way, and I speak from experience. I went through this phase myself, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But um, yeah, there's a sense that as long as things are going my way, as long as I get the conventional success out of all this, following my dreams, then love and light. But yeah, as soon as something goes sideways, then um, yeah, you just kind of wonder what might come out of those people. And it could be, it could be like that's when the real lesson hits, and that's when it starts to. I mean, they have to go through the dark night and all that kind of stuff to get to the point where, um, yeah, it's not just an affectation. It's not just clothes they're wearing. It's who they are to the core of their being. Um, and one thing that, for example, most of my life, I kind of it went all the way to the core of my being. I don't know about the core, but it's one of those things where it felt like the basement level reality, which is, my parents and grown-ups always saying like, we'll have your little young flights of fancy, but you'll come back to the real world. And what's the real world? The real world is how American grown-ups define it, right? Um, so even when I was, traveling solo and having adventures, there was a sense that like someday, unless I, hit the lottery, um, the real world is probably waiting. The real world of like, the way our culture presents the real world of like drudgery and yeah, I mean, you know how it is. So so sure enough, okay, so I'll give an example of myself. In my 20s, I had so much access to wisdom at my fingertips. I had great people to talk to, and I believed things like, in Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, he talks about there are those who give with joy, and that joy is their reward, and there are those who give with pain, and that pain is their baptism, and there are those who give as yonder myrtle tree breathes its fragrance into space, and seeks not joy in giving nor feels any pain. It's just like it's just what's happening. Like it's not there's no I'm giving this to you. It's just happening, right? Um, and I had glimpses of that. I had examples of that, and it felt instinctively true. Um, I was like, that, yeah, that sounds like that feels right somehow. Um, but I didn't really understand it yet. Uh, and sometimes I could live as if it was true. And like writing my book, it felt kind of like that as far as like I have to write this book. It's not, I'm not, it's not necessarily transactional. It's just, this is the thing that needs to happen now. Like that's all there is to it. I could resist it, but I'd be miserable. So whatever hell or high water, I got to write this book, right? Um, but then, once it's published and it didn't have the sales numbers that I'd hoped for, and it didn't lead to another career, and it kind of like, I mean, it didn't lead to like, some people they write a debut book and then agents are knocking down their doors offering six-figure advances for whatever they're going to write next, right? Didn't happen for me. Rarely happens, didn't happen for me. Um, so I felt kind of left high and dry by the universe. I was like, dude, I did my part. Where's the success? Where's the money? Where's the, um, and I mean, as it happened, by the time I was killing myself, doing 100 book events all around the world, um, and kind of breaking even, I was married and we were trying to have kids, and that wasn't going well either. We uh, long story short, we had losses. We had IVF that didn't work. It went on for 4 years. Um, a lot of a lot of pain, um, and there wasn't a sense of like I can trust the universe to give me what I need. There was a sense of the stakes are too high. I have to brute force this however I can. And similar with the success of the book slash solving the Middle East, like the stakes are too high. I can't just, do what I do and let the universe take over from there. Like I've got to make it happen. And it wasn't happening. And having kids wasn't happening. No matter what I tried. And I did endless research and procedures, supplements. Uh, and obviously, I mean, eventually we had a kid and then we had another kid. So that's great. And, looking back, it's like, well, if I probably would have happened the same, if not sooner, if I had been able to relax and trust the universe instead of obsessively, trying to just be in like stress mode all the time of like, how can I optimize this? How can I figure this out? How can I fix it? Um, the solution we finally stumbled into, I mean, I guess it did come in a way um, from a lot of reading and sort of random places, but it didn't have to be as intensive as it was. I mean, I didn't have to have spent that much time and that much stress just being like a ball of stress about it, right? Um, but anyway, yeah. So we had a kid, we had another kid, we had a pandemic. Things were crazy, and I didn't have time to think about anything. It was just survival mode, for the 202 thing for a while. And then, and it was not only survival mode as far as, like just physically and time wise and all that, it was also, I felt like I was getting a PhD on the job learning how to parent because I had no freaking clue. Um, and I don't mind, I don't have any regrets about intensively studying that because that was extremely fruitful in so many ways. Just learning about human nature and learning how to relate to my kids as full humans without being like an authoritarian or a martyr. Um, it's intuitive once you get the hang of it, but until you do, the cultural influences are like pretty much pushing you into like either you've got to be a martyr or you've got to be a tyrant. Those seem to be your only options, and they're not. But anyway, um, point is when the youngest was 2, and we finally had a house, and I could finally kind of come up for air. Um, that's when the whole spiritual journey started because it was like, I mean, even before then, I had written a novel that kind of wrote or logicked me into understanding much more deeply that life is not about mainstream success. Life is not about getting exactly what you think you want. But again, that was kind of like understanding, and I was kind of living like that. But the energetics were still such that if something had been knocked sideways, it would have knocked me off of that perch. So it's like it's the wisdom is not stabilized until it's fully integrated with the energetics. So it's like, you know, if you're in kind of a pose of wisdom that you believe and that you're living as if, but the energetics aren't there yet, it's like you're standing on one foot all the time. Like anything can knock you over, and it takes a lot of effort. Um, when the energetics are stabilized, when you go through the full awakening and realization process, and the shadow work, the dark night of the soul, the um, the vulnerability of opening yourself to whatever shadows um, the universe wants to throw at you, getting to a point where all your anger at the universe, all of your resentment, it starts to not be suppressed, but be expressed and genuinely fade. Then what you start to feel like is, okay, for first you're kind of on 2 feet finally. You're like, oh, this is relaxing. Um, I'm not just standing on one foot. I'm on 2 feet now. Because yeah, behaving as if something is true, even quite skillfully. Some people that's the best they can do, and they do it until they die, and that's fine. Um, some people it's a stepping stone. Some people they do it until they get knocked over, and then maybe they even regress to something cruel, or I mean, who knows? Like something much less enlightened than yeah than that pose standing on one foot, you know. Or that could be the catalyst, as I said, to go through this whole thing. But yeah, more and more, what I feel like is I feel like now kind of I'm standing on 2 feet, right? Um, as things continue, but even on 2 feet, like a hurricane can knock you down, right? Or a good hard shove from behind when you're not looking, maybe, right? Um, but the idea is the deeper you go into the realization process, the more you're actually putting down roots into like solid soil. And so at that point, even a hurricane, maybe a category 5, can still at some point, or an F5 tornado can eventually, or can knock you for a loop at certain stages. But when it gets fully unshakable, I don't know if any human actually gets fully unshakable, but some people seem to get pretty close. Um, then yeah, even a hurricane, even an F5 tornado, could not uproot this thing that you don't just know, don't just believe, don't just live, but embody all the way down to your bones, all the way down to your roots. So yeah, something I've been thinking about, because like I say, I see people even sort of commenting on spiritual videos or posts or whatever, and I can sense this kind of instability or brittleness that they're kind of standing on one foot with this thing, and that's fine. That can be like for sure a a, um, a step along the progression. But just because you can talk the talk, even just because you can walk the walk, doesn't mean you've digested it. You've done the really tough shadow work, the really deep energetic unhookings that kind of transport you toward the place where you're so deeply rooted, so unshakable. It becomes it becomes unconditional, totally unconditional.